Hello, and welcome to Murder in the Spotlight. I'm your host, Kimberly Tremblay. Our podcast will analyze an unsolved murder mystery. Before we dive into the world of Sigrid Stevenson, I want to introduce my hosts. This is Angel and Cole. I want to take you guys down this rabbit hole of the murder of Sigrid Stevenson. And this happened in New Jersey in 1977. And she was found on a theater stage in Kendall Hall at Trenton State College. So it was September 4th. It was, after Labor Day weekend, right before college started, and students weren't on campus just yet. And a security guard was kind of driving around patrolling the area when he saw a bike chained outside. And so since no one was supposed to be on campus, he went into the theater to take a look around, and the door was locked when he entered and all the lights were off. And so he suspected initially that there was an intruder. And so he went to this main stage area where he saw what he thought was just a person sleeping on the ground. And so he went over, and the person was lying on kind of their side with a blanket up to their neck. He assumed initially that it was just a prop that had been left out. But as he got closer, he saw that it was a large amount of blood by a body. So once he got close enough, he kind of crouched down and saw that it was that she had no pulse and that she was dead. I know, on a stage too. It's quite dramatic. He drew his weapon since he didn't know if the person who had done it was still there. And so he went and called for backup. Campus went from having no one there to being covered and just swarmed with cops all around the theater. And so when they turned the lights on, they could see she was covered in blood and had the piano blanket around her. And the police found her belongings kind of off to the side of the stage. And in her bag, they found her driver's license, which ultimately identified her as Sigrid Stevenson. She was 25 years old, and she was a music major at the college.
That's a pretty traumatic event. Mm-hmm. And I think her clothes was also beside that bag, right? So she was actually naked when she was wrapped.
She was naked
into
underneath
the piano blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So there's,
it's a piano blanket.
I think it's a cover.
It's just
a piano cover.
Yeah.
Anyway, it looked like a pretty bad scene, and eventually I think they conducted an autopsy to determine what was the cause of her death.
She was hit, right?
And they found that she was sexually assaulted, and they also conducted that her death happened between 11:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. So 7 from 11:30 p.m. is where the murder happened. And they also realized that she was hit in the head with a hard object. So that was, the amount of blood that caused this trauma from the hit to the head. But what was really bizarre about the whole thing is that the officer did not see any footprints. So there was a large amount of blood around her body.
No footprints. There would be a lot.
No. Oh. Yeah, exactly. That's what you would think. You would think the murderer would be, have blood on them and then have to walk away a bloody scene. But the body was found well wrapped in the piano blanket and no footprints. So there's many theories surrounding around this case, but it did go cold. They didn't, they had polygraph tests, but from the officers.
Yeah, what do you know about that?
So I think the first theory that police had was that it was a campus officer because they would have keys to the theater. One, they would know that she was there. And then also they had found some bruising. She was found bruising on her wrist that was consistent with being restrained. That could have been from handcuffs. Mm-hmm. Also, she was beat, it was blunt force trauma from an object or weapon, which could have been officers in, I think, 15 during the investigation, and then they gave statements. But obviously nothing came from that because it's still a cold case. And then a couple months after Sigrid's murder, one of them was talking to another officer and confessed to killing Sigrid.
An officer.
Yeah, one of the other officers.
And that was never taken seriously, right?
No, so it was
Wow.
taken as a joke.
So they never really investigated that
Yeah.
Not him,
specific
no.
So
police officer.
Yeah, which is interesting too. If you're going to look at it from the context, like if it was a police officer, all of like their footprints would be on the scene. Like if it's a campus police officer, the footprints
Yeah.
are going to be on the scene.
Maybe.
Their fingerprints are going to be on. They work there, so they're going to have
Right.
gone
That's a
in
really
and out
good
of the
point.
theater at some point. So a lot of the things that would be like surrounding, like assuming that she knew the killer, which is like I'm pretty sure like statistically like it's
Likely
a super
to.
high likelihood, right? He's probably gone, even if he didn't know her specifically, like he just knew of her, they were acquaintances. He's probably gone in the theater a bunch of times. He's probably touched things.
Yeah.
His hair is probably fallen out in the theater.
And they say they didn't find any fingerprints or
Right.
nothing.
So,
So,
but
it's a little
if
bit
you-
odd.
And he would know about
Yeah.
covering
But what
his
about this
tracks.
guy Chuck? Like who's Chuck? I think
Oh, he was
he was
in the
cast-
play.
He's a cast
and
member.
and he was playing a police officer who would have
That is
handcuffs,
the
a
funniest thing
nightstick.
about the whole story is that the actual play, all the cast members, a lot of them were police officers. So they all had handcuffs and they all had batons.
And the thing is, his ex-girlfriend had gone to the police years later saying that her ex-boyfriend had been, he was Chuck and he was abusive and had even said like, oh, I could kill you. I've done it before. And she had even told police that Chuck was really scared of the police. So, he had done some shady things, but
So they took that one seriously
they did.
and they checked for DNAs
And it didn't match.
and it didn't match.
No, they took DNA from Chuck's brother because Chuck passed away in 2016. So this is a few decades after the case had gone cold. But yeah, they got DNA from Chuck's brother. He gave a sample after police explained the situation, and they compared his DNA to the DNA that was found on the scene, and it didn't match. So
that went down the rabbit hole. It didn't
literally,
match.
it wasn't Chuck.
So another guy they investigated was the maintenance worker of the college. So apparently Sigrid had rapport with the maintenance worker for the Kendall Hall Theater because she would go there to practice her piano lessons and he had the keys to the building. So she befriended him in order
Did
for...
they date?
Sorry?
Did they date?
Well, that's it. They don't think that they dated. So they did investigate that to see if they actually had, a serious relationship or anything, but they didn't find anything of that. So they think that, Sigrid was friend with the maintenance worker in order to just get him to open the door so she could go practice, her piano in the evenings. There's many theories, right, around the investigators about who killed Sigrid. But bottom line is that it's a cold file or cold case.
A cold case.
I think
Yeah.
it's the campus police. I think it makes
do
most
too.
sense.
It does
'Cause
make sense.
They would know the routines, like the schedules of all the maintenance workers and the schedules of the other police officers. They would have access to the area. It wouldn't seem suspicious for them to be going in and out of the theater or to be cleaning things up, right? And then not only that, but like they're all buddies. Like you're not going to immediately assume that your buddy's the one that did it. So when he gives you kind of a shitty half alibi, like you're probably going to believe it.
I
And then
agree
when you're
that-
2 weeks
yeah.
later or 3 weeks later or a month later and you start looking back into it, now a month has passed. Like, what did you eat for dinner a month ago?
Yeah.
If someone says something doesn't add up at that point, it's like, how do you even hold
Yeah.
that over them?
That's the hard thing is like you can't imagine your closest friend, family member as being someone who is capable of sexual assault and then murder, but also living with the fact that you've done that. So I don't know. I think that this case, there's so many things that should have been done differently. I think that that kind of confession that the cop made like at the beginning,
Yeah, that should have been
that shouldn't have been
investigated
taken-
a little
yeah.
bit further.
it shouldn't have been taken as a joke.
Weird joke.
Very,
Like super
very
weird, joke.
joke.
Like,
Yeah, it's not a joke.
Well,
It's
yeah,
not a
it's
joke.
like
Right?
it's not even
I
like
killed someone. That's not funny.
well, especially like this isn't like it's not like a random, not a random, but it's not like someone died in like an accident or something and you're making like a weird joke about it. It's like such a horrific case and something that doesn't ever happen. Like it's such a weirdly specific thing to make.
But would you ever say that? Like,
No,
oh,
that's what
I
I
killed
mean.
someone?
Like,
would you
there's-
ever
no,
say
it's a
that to
weird
someone?
thing to
You
joke
would
about.
never say something
No,
like that.
there are many theories, but ultimately, investigators have never been able to figure out who killed her. And her case has been cold now for 47 years, but that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you so much, guys, for joining in and having a conversation. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you later. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today.